This is Three Brothers Movie Reviews, and we just got finished rewatching The Thing. We saw it at a really cool cinema that plays older movies, and the film is directed by John Carpenter, the director of Halloween and Assault on Precinct 13. It's written by Bill Lancaster, the writer of The Bad News Bears, and the film stars Kurt Russell, and it's about this base inside of Antarctica. And in this base, they discover that there is this alien presence that can assimilate people and other beings, make it look exactly like them. And they figure out that this being is a massive threat, and immediately after that, they begin to take action to try and kill it and prevent it from infecting the rest of the world. So we rewatched this at the theater because we love it. Like, this is a classic movie. We're both big John Carpenter fans. Like, John Carpenter is
clearly
so
not
awesome.
the only fans in this.
Oh man, this theater was packed to the brim. I mean, yeah, like we had difficulty finding parking. Yeah,
and mostly young people. Like, this is not like a movie where like it's just like nostalgia-driven people who saw it in the '80s showing up. Like, it's folks like our age, 30s, 20s. Like, it was just a bunch of college kids and us just like hanging out, rocking out with the John Carpenter movie for the evening.
It was a nice experience. Like, what a great theater. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, The Thing is great. Well, let's just jump right into positives here with films constructed. Like, what's your ultimate takeaway with The Thing? Like, what is it that you think makes it so timeless? Like, this movie was panned originally in theaters. Like, it was like
not just bad reviews, like
horrific,
attempting to like basically say that like this movie was bottom of the barrel garbage. Like,
absolutely.
if you read the reviews, it's shocking.
Yeah,
how rough they are.
It's such a shame. This movie came out the same weekend as E.T. and Blade Runner. So this movie was just it was tossed in the trash can essentially. People didn't see it. People wanted to see the more lighthearted alien movie, and ultimately this one just got forgotten. The critics hated it. And since then, it's regained a bit of a following, and people still like The Thing. So, what's the ultimate thing? What do you think is the reason people go back to see it?
At least for me, like I think you said this is your second time seeing it. I think this is my third. What's really amazing about the movie is how it feels like a much smaller movie, but on a bigger budget.
Yes.
And ultimately, it's a really simple movie. And I think that simplicity is probably the biggest draw of the movie. Is it's simply a bunch of guys in an enclosed space with a monster. And the funny thing is, like, The Thing is originally, I think, a movie from the 1950s. And it's all based on a book. And like the 1950s kind of movie kind of plays it more as like a classic, like just monster, and it just looks like a dude with stuff on him. Nothing really special, but the concept is the same. It's people in an enclosed space in Antarctica, like the bleakest place on Earth, who have to deal with a monster. And what's really striking for me in this movie is, especially in the first, I would say, 20-25 minutes, it's all build and
setup and establishment. Lots of questions with no answers. Like, it opens with these Norwegians firing on a rifle on this dog. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what the hell is this? And you don't learn what's happening. You have to like follow through with the characters because like you're figuring it out as they're figuring it out. So.
Yeah, and it's amazing how one of the things that's interesting about rewatching this movie is you know the story.
Yes.
And so you're paying attention to those small things. Like, I love
it's like
this.
Psycho. Like when you rewatch it and like, the first time you're like, oh, what the? And then you rewatch it and you're like, ooh, you like notice all those little details. You're like, holy cow, like this movie's really smart. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I love this bit early on where the characters have just gunned down the Norwegian crew who were basically firing upon them for seemingly no reason. And they go to investigate the Norwegian base, and they take off in a helicopter, and you see the dog that they had been chasing just sitting in the base looking at them. And what's really interesting watching this movie again is, like, you know what the dog is.
Yes.
And so every time you see the dog hanging around, moving about, you realize, oh, it's scouting. Like, this is a smart creature. This is not just a dumb animal. Like, this is a really intelligent alien who's figuring out how things work in this new environment.
Yeah.
And there's that bit, like, probably towards the end of this kind of like early sequence where you see it wandering the halls, and then it enters a room where all you see is a silhouette on the wall of a man. You don't know who it is, but then it just fades to black. And you're
Really
left to
creepy
guess
stuff,
that it's possible that this was the first human in the base assimilated by the thing.
Yeah, there's lots of details like that, and a film which is similar to this movie is actually Alien, like the Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien. And you mentioned that this creature is smart. Like the xenomorph, in many ways, is simple. It's like it's a creature; it just wants to kill. There isn't much layering in the way it's constructed. It's more in the set design and like the way that film's directed, the way it like is.
The creature's
framed.
more or less a predator. It deals with instinct, not necessarily intelligence.
Yes.
Like it's smart, but it's smart in the way that like a hunter, like a predatory animal is, not in the way that like a living human being is, like that figures stuff out.
Yeah, and honestly, I could probably call Alien a little better than The Thing. Like, I think as a film, it's better. Like, this feels more in line with a genre movie, but I love it equally as much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things which I believe succeeds Alien is the interplay between both the antagonist and the protagonist. Like, this creature is smart. This creature is trying to turn these people against each other, and they're trying to like do the best they can to like maintain sanity and like find a way to trust each other. It's riveting to see them like trying to be one step ahead of the creature, and it's
And it's funny because what I found myself doing as an audience member is I know several of the surprises in this movie because I've seen it before, but there were several things where I was like, wait a minute, how did the thing do that? Like there's a scene where they realize that the thing is probably taken over multiple humans at this point, and the situation's serious. So they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we know who's real? If this thing can make a perfect imitation of anyone, how do we know who's a real person?
So how do we know who's human? If I was an imitation, a perfect imitation, how would you know if it was really me?
And they decide, well, we all have blood samples that are on, like, in refrigeration. We can take blood samples of ourselves now, and whichever blood samples react badly, we can know who's the real thing at that point. But when they go to the refrigerator, the blood has just been completely ripped apart, and that's no longer viable for a test. And they basically identified two characters that had access.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, wait a minute, like, if neither of them was a thing, if one of them was a thing, who actually got the blood? And I'm still thinking about it now, and I'm not quite sure who did.
Like, honestly, I would love to lay this movie out as a map. Like there's lots of things. Like, are we going to talk about spoilers here?
I think we can.
We're halfway through.
This movie is over 30 years old.
Yeah,
like, at this
please
point,
see The Thing.
you should see the movie. If you don't want to know about spoilers, you can cut off the review at this point.
Yeah.
It's widely available. If you can see it in a theater, it's well worth your time.
Please
but
do, yeah.
It's absolutely a movie to watch in the dark with someone else.
Yes. So, okay, yeah, that, like, there's so many details like that where you realize different characters were the thing. Like, honestly, one of the moments which I always love, like, later on, is the scene where they're testing the different blood, and then you see, like, it's right before the guy who's about to be discovered, you see he's like...
Palmer now.
He's just kind of like, well, I'm
It's just
screwed.
it was funny because you've seen it before. Like, for anyone who's not seen it before, it's just like an odd moment, but you're just like, he's just like, well, shit's about to get real.
It's so great. I love that. So yeah, like there's so many details like that in the film that play in later, and you have to figure out the mystery with the characters. And some of those mysteries, like, they don't really have definitive answers.
They don't.
But it doesn't feel like the movie doesn't really make sense. It feels like it adds up, but in some way you don't know why things happen. You understand, like, how they had happened before, but you don't understand, like, the direct cause. Like, who was it? Like, was it the thing? Was it a person? Like, like even that jacket. RJ's jacket when it's like all ripped and they suspect him of being the Thing. Like, was that the Thing that did that? Was that a human who did that? Like, could Childs have done that? Like, you don't know stuff like that, and it makes the film really concerning. Yeah.
It's almost like imagine like a movie like Halloween, which is like a classic slasher film. Generally, the point of view of the audience is split between the killer and the other people, like the victims.
Yeah.
So you basically are able to piece together the whole story. This is like a slasher film where you're only getting the perspective of the victims.
Yeah.
You don't get the perspective of the killer almost at all.
Yeah, like other than the dog. That's about it. But other than that, you don't. As soon as it becomes a human,
exactly.
Like you never see like the Thing as a human, like interacting where you're like, okay, that thing's definitely a thing. You just have to guess.
Yeah.
And it's freaky. So, yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the ending here. Like, the ending turned people off when this movie was released. People did not like it. People called it bleak. Like, we could talk about theories or whatever. So, common thing which people always point to is McCready has breath. He has the vapor coming out of his mouth. Childs does not.
Right.
And, you know, that's a little bit curious. I did notice that this time around. I remember, like, the first time I didn't quite catch that, but yeah. They left Childs inside, and they told him, like, if Blair comes back and we're not with him, burn him. And then they blow up the entire base when the generator goes out.
Right.
But we never saw them with the group again. So I'm like, yeah, how did he get out? Did he actually leave or did he not? And then
well, you see him leave the entrance, so you know that he was not in the base when the power went out. So I think that I took it as he was not responsible for the generator going out. The Blair, the Blair
thing.
The Blair
hybrid,
thing is responsible for that because they later find him there. I don't know. This is I read an.
It doesn't really matter. That's the
it
thing
doesn't
which is
matter.
there. Yeah.
And and honestly, I watched an interview with John Carpenter recently where he talked about like he described himself as a very dark person who is I think he described himself as a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. And I think his films kind of reflect that.
Yes.
Like, he tends to have much more pessimistic, much more bleak endings. I personally don't think either McCready or Childs is a thing.
Yeah.
I think that, like, for me, the way I took it is Childs and McCready have been basically at odds the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like, almost the entire movie,
even before the thing
shows up. And I think that it was just their moment they share at the end. Like, I think I've heard it described like McCready's smiling because, like, he handed Childs a Molotov cocktail, and so if he drinks it normally, that means he's a thing. I took that smile as more a just kind of a moment between those two people.
Wait, was that a Molotov?
I don't think it was.
He never drinks it. See, this is the thing about the ending. People have been like, if you think
you could honestly.
It's about the moment.
There are a dozen theories out there. They could all be true. I took it this time as two characters that have been constantly in conflict.
Yeah.
Finally have a moment where they just treat each other as men.
Yes.
Dealing with the aftermath of a horrific situation that's left everybody else at the base just either died by horrible circumstances or assimilated by this alien.
Yeah. It's that line that he says where he's like, if any of us have any surprises for us, then I don't think we're in any condition to do anything about it. Like,
right.
And, you know, that's all it is. They're just there. They're like, you know what? We're going to die anyway. Like, you know, here we are. Let's just wait.
Have a drink.
Yep. It's cool. And I'm like, you know, that's the ultimate thing. You're like, if they were both human, they would have died. They defeated the thing. The world's saved. If not, then the world is dead. And like,
right.
And Carpenter places this in his unofficial Apocalypse trilogy.
Is this the first of his Apocalypse trilogy?
It's the first. The second is The Prince of Darkness, and the third is In the Mouth of Madness. And I've seen In the Mouth of Madness. I haven't seen Prince of Darkness yet.
I still need to see both those movies.
But in all three of those, there are just world-ending stakes. There are the possibility of the world ending. Mm-hmm. And in all three of them, like, you kind of get this weird scope where you see, like, individual perspective, but overall, like, the entire world could end. And it's that same thing here. You just follow these men inside of this place, but you know that the consequences of if this thing ever were to get anywhere outside of the most remote place on the entire planet,
Oh, yeah.
then the entire world would be doomed. There would be
Yeah.
no way to contain it.
It would be the fact that the spaceship landed in Antarctica
Yeah.
is a miracle. Like,
Exactly.
of all the places it could have landed, it landed in the best possible place to contain a creature like this.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a unique creature.
Oh yes,
Like-
the way it's designed, like it doesn't really have any design. Like people have
Right.
compared it to H.P. Lovecraft's work. Like it's great that way. Like the xenomorph, like it's tangible. It looks like something. Like in all these horror movies, like when you see it, often it's a little bit of a relief. And like
Right.
they continue that later on in like Aliens, like the shark and Jaws. Like it's more about the build. In this movie, the build never goes away, because this creature is always changing. And
Right.
when it becomes something, you see what it's like, and it's like it's freaky. Like
There's a scene early on where they autopsy the dog creature.
yeah,
And they just they start peeling back layers of it, and you see some things look familiar, you see some things that look like dog, some things that look like maybe like a spider, some insect, and then you just see stuff where you're just like, what the hell is that?
yeah.
Like, there's just stuff that looks like, I mean, you imagine like maybe it's like other aliens the thing is assimilated, but like
It's like the blob almost. Like
Yeah.
you're just like, yeah. The way they put the prosthetics together, it's crazy.
Rob Bottin deserves major shout out. He was like a guy in his 20s who I think had basically mentored under guy
Stan Winston, right?
not Stan Winston, but the guy that did the makeup work in American Werewolf in London.
Oh Lord forbid, I forgot his name.
I can't remember his name, but like basically like this guy worked under like a Jedi master of
Yes.
makeup, and he basically worked himself into the hospital.
Oh yeah, if
to
you
be
look
able to
into
do
the
the work
production
on
of this
his.
movie, it was a freaking nightmare.
Oh
It
my
was
gosh,
just
yeah.
like Jaws. Like the entire set was like miserable to work in, and like the way that these special effects had to be put together. I mean, like
The actors were gonna revolt because they were really tired of dealing with the special effects. Like,
I mean, like people were working overtime. They were working round the clock, 20 hours to get like these effects going, and it shows because
my
they're
gosh.
freaking amazing. Like the ending is actually chopped down. Like there was supposed to be a longer like fight scene with like McCready. It was supposed
honestly,
to drag
it
on.
feels like that. Having
Yes.
watched it, this is like my third time watching it. It feels
Like there's this like moment where he's like there and then and
Right.
then it, like attacks and then he just throws the dynamite. There was supposed to be a little bit more, and like
Right.
that last creature just took so long. That was like kind of the last shot, and they didn't want to throw like a sloppy mess together for the ending fight because they were already like running past their production
Right.
budget, and they just opted with that. And I like that. I appreciate
That's
that
fair.
they put effort into the individual effects. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, like the best parts of this movie are not really. I would not say really
effects.
action beats or effects. Like probably the standout scene is the blood test scene.
Yeah.
Which does end in a pretty spectacular fashion.
And of course the defibrillation, the like.
Right.
And I remember people will still like that one just comes out of absolutely nowhere. Just
What's really amazing about like a movie like this is, even if you've seen it a few
Yeah.
times and you know when the scares are gonna happen, they still manage to surprise you. Like the timing, like you're
Yeah.
just like, you know it's coming, but like the timing gets me.
It's not like in normal horror movies. You're like, and then just it happens. You're like, oh, it's whatever. It's like in this, it's like there's something about it where it's uneasy. Where you're like,
Yeah.
it's not like you're expecting it to come. You're just like, I know it's going to come.
Right.
I don't know quite when, but I do know.
And
like,
even when
you'll
it
get me.
happens, like the defibrillator scene, it's just like, oh my gosh, that guy just lost his arms.
Yeah.
And like he like shoots up like this like mass, and I love every time I see like that scene in the defibrillation, because you realize like, oh my gosh, the thing that just came out of him is like an attempt to replicate the doctor it just ate the arms of. Like, what the hell?
Like, yeah, I love reading into that scene. Like it, like they redid the like coming out of the
Yeah.
chest because like he said it. John Carpenter said it looked like the Vegas fountains, and he wanted it to look more like oh my gosh, the effects are great.
Yeah.
Man. This the thing is a classic. I
It's
love
unique.
rewatching
It's
it.
unique, but it's simple. Like I think that I mean this movie
Like
got trashed early on But I think that people come back to it because at its core, it's a really simple and effective movie about a bunch of guys who are stuck in the middle of nowhere and they don't know who to trust because they're trapped in the worst place on earth with a monster that can look like them.
Really good character development, and like it just simple concept. Like I said, like Alien is more in line with this like recognizable film where like culture will recognize it. The Thing is a genre film.
Yeah.
It's a genre film, and it's just so well executed, and there's so much heart in it that it's an amazing experience.
Yeah, this is the ultimate John Carpenter movie. Like John Carpenter always was most comfortable in genre work and just bringing it to A level. Like, because genre movies are basically B movies.
Yeah.
But if you have someone like Carpenter who really knows how to make a movie really well and really knows, I think that honestly, like something that can be overlooked in a movie like this because it has these crazy effects and it's just really well put together, has an amazing score by Ennio Morricone, but like all the work with the actors is amazing.
Oh yeah.
Like all these characters act in ways that you're like, yes, this is the way people act. Like usually like when people talk down about horror movies because characters make stupid decisions.
Yeah.
It's not the characters making stupid decisions is what people are criticizing, though. It's the fact that they can't see themselves making those decisions, which is an issue of acting and an issue of direction of those actors making it so that you as an audience can connect with people. Like what I love about this movie is all the decisions characters make. I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. I mean, what else are you going to do?
There's actual character development. Like, you know, it's not like the characters are just running around like pinballs in a pinball machine. They're actually developed. Like, one of the scenes, like, that you mentioned and, like, the reaction that you'd get is when Windows runs for the shotguns and then Gary holds them at gunpoint. Like, I forgot about that moment. Like, it's a really great moment that, like, could be cut from the movie, but is so important where you're just, like, you just get the weight of him just being so scared and just like wanting to run for like even the most slight source of protection. And then Gary also being paranoid, like even after he's put down the gun, like it's such a great moment for just showing like these are actual people.
And
they're
I love
actually
Gary's
scared.
reaction. Like even after that whole scene, he's got the gun, he's got the power, he puts it down.
Yes.
Because he realizes nobody trusts me.
No.
The only way I can get people to trust me is to put down the gun.
Yeah.
And that's when McCready takes charge. And it's interesting to watch the interplay between the characters. Like, I love this moment. It's a small moment where Clark, who's the dog keeper, finds out that Blair killed the dogs.
I remember seeing that moment. Yeah, like you see just the act. And just like, there's this close-up and then it goes to wide. And you're like, I love that detail about him, that he cared about the dogs. Like, McCready has to shoot one that's being, like, assimilated by the Thing. And he reacts. He attacks him. Like... Yeah, they pour details into the characters through like the slight like manipulations of the film, the way shots are framed. Yeah,
there's a moment early on where it's so funny, like these little moments. Like Gary has a pistol, and when the Norwegians come, the Norwegians are in panic because the dog is there. Their helicopters exploded. They shoot wildly. They hit one of the Americans. And then Gary pulls his pistol out, shoots the guy right in the eye.
Yeah.
And then you have this moment where he exits the base.
And puts on his jacket.
He puts on his jacket and he just looks at the body. And you just get this feeling that he's like, I just killed a guy.
Yeah. There's never like this drawn out scene where he's like showing this like massive amount of regret, like, I killed a man. He's just, you just see, he's like, I killed him. Like, he justifies it, obviously, because he was running rampant with a gun.
But it impacts him.
Yes.
Like, the fact that he shot a guy and killed him, that has an impact on him. And
there's consequences.
They let moments sit that make sense. And it's great because did you ever watch not the remake, but the prequel to this?
I never did. I've meant to.
Honestly,
I've heard it's great, like good at setting up stuff, like the way that it constructs it, it captures the feeling. It's not quite the same, and obviously the special effects. That's a nightmare.
But one of the things that I would say the movie fails at is making me care about the characters. It has the problem of 90% of the people you see are cannon fodder. And you don't really get the chance to connect with them in real human moments, like that moment with Gary, that moment with Clark.
And honestly, like that time when like after the blood test scene where like a lot of people get offed at the same time. I was
Yeah.
like, damn. I remember like just seeing that there's just 4 of them left, and you're just
Right.
like, except for Blair, and you're just like, dude, like,
Because you get several shots of them like early on where you're like, oh yeah, there's like a dozen of them. Like
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of guys there. And yeah,
when they
it's-
get picked off one by one, it means something.
Yes.
Because of the amount of time you spent with them. Yeah.
Are we even gonna talk negatives?
We
Like,
could talk
I don't
about this
think
movie
so.
for an hour. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
really have significant negatives with this movie, but I
Yeah.
mean, like, holy cow! Like, I could talk about this movie forever. This is.
Makes me want to watch more John Carpenter movies because I really
I-
haven't seen a ton of them.
I've gone out of my way to see more of him. Like I'm always impressed when I see his movies. I need to get his obscure movies like Prince of Darkness, but
Yeah.
I'm impressed every single time I see one of his movies. So yeah.
Hats off to you, Carpenter. This is easily my favorite thing you've ever done.
Absolutely. So we're going to change up our grading system before. We've usually done 1 out of 10. We always have struggled with that though. I'm not a fan of that because like the lower grades, it's a little bit harder to quantify putting it to a more scientific number.
Yeah.
We're going to do grades instead. So grade A+ to F. What would you go for the thing?
A+. It's one of those movies that I've seen it now 3 times, and every time I see it, it's fresh. It's fresh, and even on my way here, I was thinking, yeah, this is a great movie. It's tense, but it's not really scary. And the movie just was like, oh, really? And it's scary. This is absolutely a horror film. It's science fiction. It has elements of science fiction, but at its heart, this is definitely a horror film, and it is very scary. And it has great characters. It's got obviously like standouts. It's got obviously standouts like McCready, but McCready and Childs. But every character means something. Every decision makes sense. Every shot is really amazing. It's got a great set. This is just a really solid. I agree with you. This is the pinnacle of what genre filmmaking should be.
Yeah.
And this is like John Carpenter at the height of his powers, and it just breaks my heart that this movie made no money, and it really basically tanked any chance of us seeing big budget Carpenter like this ever again.
Yeah. I am the same. This movie is a cult masterpiece. Like there's a reason why this movie was panned by critics at first, but people have gone back to it. It's because it is a great movie. It's a movie which was misunderstood when it first came out, but it is so solid. It has fantastic direction, character work which is not usually seen in a horror movie, and the way this film is constructed is so unorthodox and fresh, and it never lets you off the hook. It builds with tension, it builds with characters, and it all leads to satisfying payoffs, and the entire movie is so satisfying. I am also going to give The Thing an A+. This movie is brilliant. I would definitely recommend it. Like, if you can see it in theaters, like, it was so nice just seeing it with the crowd, like the crowd which is screaming along with it, because this movie is so much fun.
I love that
It's
this movie
tense.
has that power. It still has that power like 30 years after it came out.
Yeah, I like that about it. You're like, those critics who hated the movie, well, guess what? We're here in 2019, and that theater was packed to the brim. And it's so satisfying that was happening.
I can't imagine it being very fun for people who like give movies that are now like legendary bad reviews.
Yeah, just
Like-
just sitting.
Yeah.
I always do say that, man. Like, critics, I mean, come on. We're talking about your initial opinion here. Like, you do not have to be rock solid into what you thought when you saw a movie for the first time.
Yeah.
It's completely fine to be like, you know what? This movie's actually better than I originally thought.
There are
And,
some movies that the critics are wrong on. This is absolutely one of them. This is a movie where, honestly, both the audience and the critics were wrong.
Yes.
And this is a movie that, I don't know if it just came out at the wrong time or if it was just the people audience wasn't ready for it, but this is a movie that really matured and grew. And it never left the public consciousness, and like it eventually grew into the status it is now, which is this is one of the classic science fiction horror films ever.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great movie.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for watching. This is Three Brothers Movie Reviews, and please subscribe to the channel for more videos in the future.
See you guys.